Hello everyone! One of the things I do every year is think about what I will not be doing again in my garden the next year. And usually I just sit here and talk through it, but since a lot of the things I won't be doing are still happening in the garden, I figured we would do a little walk around and I will show you what I'm either going to completely eliminate or just change a little bit for next year. So the number one thing that I need to not do next year is forget to stake a lot of the plants that definitely need it. And I should probably stake earlier on so that I'm not panicking when they are already starting to fall over. But for example, this one-eyed Jill dahlia should be going up, but she is currently going horizontal all the way through here because it's just so windy up here on the rooftop deck. She got much taller than I expected. I tried to fix it with twine and tape and random metal poles, but it was already too heavy and too late by then, and a lot of the times when I did try to stake it afterwards, I would accidentally break some branches. So there are a lot of things that I need to stake that I will point out to you. Now, this is because I'm gardening on a rooftop deck and it is extra windy. You might not need to stake some of these things if you are gardening at ground level. If you look at this one-eyed Jill, which is on the other side of the same border, you notice that she is standing upright. And the only reason is I ended up tying her to a cement pot that's sitting on the ledge. So I did grow 3 of these. 2 are horizontal, 1 is mostly vertical, but this is just something I need to plan for ahead of time next year. Another thing I won't be doing next year is planting my cosmos here in the raised bed. So this back border, which is one of my favorites because the church in the background makes this a fantastic view. This border is made up of 3 elevated beds that are about 17 inches tall, and then there are 2 grow bags between the beds. So this one right here with the pink pearl is actually a grow bag, and that's maybe like 10 inches off the ground. I think having the cosmos in the border is beautiful, but I just don't think the elevated beds, which are a little bit taller than the grow bags, are the right spot for it. One, it is huge. It's kind of smothered some other plants that were in the raised bed. I also don't think the height is the best option for the cosmos. Yes, it does blow beautifully in the breeze when it's just a gentle breeze, but we get very strong winds up here. And this is so much higher above the wall, which usually gives pretty good protection, that branches break. I've come out and it is horizontal. I have to stake it back up. So what I think I'm going to do differently next year is take this out of the raised bed, plant it into a grow bag because I do still love it in the border. That way it'll bring it down about 6 inches, so that should give it a bit more protection from the wind, and it will be contained in its own container. I also think I'm going to do a cage, maybe just like a 19-inch support cage, so it stays a little bit more vertical instead of flopping all over the place. So I am still going to grow cosmos. This is the Cupcakes Blush Cosmos. I'm just going to take it out of these raised beds and shift it over into its own grow bag. I also think these dahlias just seem to do a lot better in the raised bed. They don't take over the same way the cosmos does, so I'm just going to switch a few plants around for next year. Something else I'm going to change is the boxes on the ledge behind me, behind my dahlia border. They are currently filled with Supertunia Vista Cool Jazz. Last year I planted Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, and yes, it looks beautiful right now, but it gets eaten by budworms. So I've had these probably bear 2 or 3 times. I trim them back, I do bloom boosting fertilizer, and they do come back, but I would just like something a bit lower maintenance up there that I don't really have to worry about all the flowers disappearing from. So I'm likely either going to put in some sun patience, maybe orchid blush, that is my favorite color. Those just stay filled with color all season. The budworms don't bother them. So I think that'll be a good substitution. Or some begonias. My favorite one is the apple blossom, but again, I don't know, I'll see what's available, what colors I like next year. But even though this does look really beautiful, I just want something a little bit lower maintenance. I wanted to point out something that I changed from 2024 for this year's garden that I really liked the switch. So last year I had 7-gallon grow bags, just like I do now, but instead of all dinner plate dahlias, it was a dinner plate dahlia, giant zinnia. Dinner plate dahlia, giant zinnia. And the zinnias got powdery mildew early on last year and all died. So it looked very bare with those spots between the dahlias. So this year I did all dinner plate dahlias, which means 1, I have more dahlias, and 2, if zinnias do get powdery mildew, which they have not so far this year for unknown reasons, it won't leave holes in the border. Another thing I won't do next year is grow as many China asters as I grew this year. I think I grew almost all of the varieties on Johnny's seed. I do love them. That is tower yellow right there in the bottom right corner, but they always get scale. I feel like they die back a bit earlier than some of my other flowers. And even though they are cut and come again, and I do love them, I just find that my zinnias and dahlias are a bit more productive with the cut and come again flowers. So I'm still gonna grow China asters, but I will probably narrow it down to my favorite varieties and just focus on those instead of taking a whole bed up for China asters. Another change from 2024 to 2025 that I made that I think was the right choice is I only have panicle hydrangeas up here on the rooftop deck. I do have some macrophylla hydrangeas, but those are now either on the garage or at ground level or in the parkway. A couple reasons. One, it gets very hot up here, and I feel like the panicle hydrangeas handle at high heat the best. They don't burn as often as I saw my macrophyllas burn. Also, I can overwinter these out here on the deck in a plastic greenhouse, and they survived. They've survived now, well, since 2022. So I don't have to carry these down to the garage. It's easy just to store them out here, bring them back out every spring. They just seem to be the type of hydrangea that is the happiest in this particular environment. Hello. You want to come down? Hi. And then the final thing on this deck that I'm not going to do next year is grow the glow-in-the-dark petunia. I had to try it. I had to see how it did. So this is the Firelight petunia. It's supposed to glow in the dark. A few things. One, white's not usually my color in the garden. Two, these are not as vigorous as the Supertunia vistas, and they do get eaten by budworms, so I'd rather have the petunias that I love the most if I'm going to have them eaten by budworms. And three, I don't really see much of the glow. I definitely don't outside here because it never really gets dark in Chicago. I did take it into a closet and shut the door. There was a very, very vague glow on camera only, which was interesting, but I just don't think the price and the performance is worth it. I mean, if I lived in the middle of nowhere and I saw glowing flowers at night, then maybe, but this was fun to try. I am going to try to keep it alive inside over winter because I know that some people have done that. So I'm going to keep her, but I'm not going to purchase any more for next year. I'm on the front rooftop deck now. This is on the same level as the deck we were just on, but this faces west. It is starting to sprinkle, which is weird because the weather app told me it wasn't going to rain for 4 more hours, and the weather app never lies. So we'll see how much of this we can get through before we potentially need to take a break for the rain. The first thing I need to not do next year is, again, forgetting to stake my zinnias. Now these are mostly the Queenie Lime series. I think some Aurora zinnias got in here as well. I would say they're in the medium height range of the zinnias I grow, like 3 to 4 feet. On the seed packet, it does say you don't have to stake, but again, I'm growing these on an elevated bed in an elevated garden in the Windy City. So I need to stake these earlier on next year. You might think, well, Bethany, they look really upright right now. Let me show you what's going on inside of the bed. Now, if we just look a little bit closer, you can see what's currently holding the zinnias up. I have terracotta pots that I've just put underneath some of the branches to make sure that they are staying a bit upright. I have twine, which is just all over my garden. I have bamboo stakes. I have metal poles from a greenhouse. And yes, it's holding them up, but it would be much easier, again, if I just prepared ahead of time and stake these a bit earlier. Over here on my flower cart, I am going to make some changes for next year. First up, I did plant my favorite Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. The budworms have come, and again, with something like this, I don't want to have to focus on trimming and fertilizing and looking for the budworms, so I'm going to switch to, again, something different, probably a sun patient or begonia again, because those just do so well and bloom throughout the season. Another change I'm going to make is with what's growing on top of the flower cart. So usually I do Morning Glory, which has a really good canopy, but it barely ever blooms, and I wanted some blooms. So last year I did Thumbergia, which is what this is. I did the Coconut Appeal Black-Eyed Susan vine, and it flowered, I feel like, a little bit more than this, although the Coconut Appeals that I have on the garage deck also haven't bloomed as much as they did last year, but that one also has a thicker canopy, and I think I just want a slightly thicker canopy than the Sunny Susie Rose Sensation Thumbergia that I'm growing this year. I do love pink, that's why I switched it out, but I am next year going to go back to either the Coconut Appeal Thumbergia or one of the other Proven Winners Thumbergias. The Silver Falls Dichondra, however, always does great here and helps to hide what's on the bottom shelf, so this will be here next year. I will just be substituting the petunias and the Hydrangea. Something I did differently this year that I thought was going to be a really great idea and has turned out to be the opposite was to put a raspberry bush in front of my tumbler composter. So this composter I just got this year for the front deck. I have one on the back deck. Last year, I would carry my garden waste just in a bucket from here to the back. And I was like, you know what? I have enough garden waste. It'll make it a little bit easier if I just put one here. But I don't want to stare at it in the garden the whole time, so let's move a plant in front of it. And what better than a thorny, giant raspberry bush? This, I don't know if it's the 5th year in the garden, but it is even bigger than it has been in the past. I don't use my compost tumbler anymore. Even though this is on wheels, I don't want to get myself right into a thorny bush and wheel it, which even right now, I don't have much room to wheel it. So there is a tumbler composter back there, but I've just gone back to now carrying my garden waste to the back deck. So good effort, but these are going to have to go somewhere different next year, and I will probably just leave my tumbler composter open and available. Another thing I'm going to do that somebody recommended here, in order to keep the raspberry branches contained, is use a plant support. I never even thought I'm going to have cages for my tomatoes, for my dahlias. I just never really thought of using one for my raspberry bushes. But again, small space, large thorny branches. I think if I can get them more vertical, I might even do like a 2 to 3 foot tall cage on the larger side to get these all upright. But I love my raspberries. I thought maybe about getting rid of them at the end of last year just because they are so thorny and take up so much space. But raspberries are my favorite fruit, and they taste even better when they're right off the plant. But yeah, I'm gonna be able to access my tumbler composter next year. Then there's this issue of the giant pumpkin plant. I've grown pumpkins in the past, but they've always been dwarf varieties. I got this in a pack from Burpee, and I have this problem where if I have a plant, I need to put it somewhere. So I just stuck it in the corner of my gomphrena bed without reading the label to see how large it got. And it's going now from here, behind me, all the way up to this raised bed. A few different things though. One, I do kind of like the look of the vine. In fact, let me get out of the way and show you what it looks like crawling along my deck. I just think there's something really whimsical about this vine. It makes it feel here more like a garden that's on the ground because it's covering up the containers. I really like the look of the vine. However, I also don't think it's produced any pumpkins. I don't even see like flowers that have started to turn into a pumpkin, so I don't know if I will have any. So if anything, I might just replace this with a melon plant because my watermelon, my cantaloupe, my honeydews all produce reliably. But I do love having this pumpkin. Maybe I'll just grow it up a arch or something next year. I don't know. It makes me really happy to see just giant vines climbing all over my rooftop deck. But I should probably, 1, again, plan ahead, and 2, not get something quite this large. Another thing I'm not going to do is follow any spacing recommendations from now on because I have overstuffed these beds, as you can probably tell. I overstuffed the back border on the back deck, and I've had no difference in terms of how the plants have grown. I've had no issues with additional pests or diseases. It just still looks green and beautiful. And if something dies, which happens even when I give them the right amount of space, there's enough other plants in the bed that you don't even really notice when I pull something. Now, it could just be the weather this year. Like I said, I haven't seen any powdery mildew, but even when I have given zinnias a lot of space or just one in a large container, it still gets powdery mildew anyway. So why am I following spacing guidelines when I could just shove everything in here and it really doesn't make a difference to me? Now I'm going to end with a few honorable mentions, which by that I mean these are things I should do differently next year, but I probably won't. 1, label everything. Either the seeds I start, make sure I have labels for them. The plants that I get as transplants, keep the label in the pot because as much as I tell myself, I'll remember, I don't remember. And there's been some varieties where I'm like, what exactly is this plant again? So I'm telling myself that I will label everything next year. The other thing, which I've kind of mentioned a little bit, is I won't plant every plant I have. That includes any plants I get sent. That includes the seedlings I start. I don't have to find a spot for everything. I can, but sometimes that just leads to me putting things in places that are too small for them, kind of like the pumpkin, or pots that are too small, and I just have to keep up on maintenance of those more than I would want. And sometimes they're not even things I necessarily love, and I would rather, again, save the space for plants that I love versus something that I just like a little bit in my garden. When I have minimal space, I really need to maximize it with the plants that I like the most. And then finally, which kind of goes along with the last one, I will stop using small pots. So I usually have a bunch of small pots left over. I have over time shifted to more raised beds as I've added more of the beds to my garden every year. But then when I do have a plant left over and I have, an 8-inch pot, I think I can just put it in there. And, if it's set up on irrigation, it's okay, but then it often either outgrows the small pot and just isn't happy anymore, or it's set up on irrigation, but because the pot's so small, I have to remember to water it separately anyway. So just in terms of keeping maintenance down, I am going to try to stop using as many small pots. What I consider a small pot is probably under 12 inches in diameter. A lot of my pots are that size or larger, which work really well for perennials or shoving a bunch of annuals in there. And they are large enough that they're fine just getting watered once with the irrigation, and I don't have to come out and water them manually. So that is my plan. Those are the 3 honorable mentions that I will try to follow. But those are just some of the things that I'm going to do differently next year in my garden based on what I've seen hasn't really worked this year in my garden. Let me know anything that you did in your garden this year that you will not do next year, because I'd be interested to see what it is. And I will do a whole separate video on the specific plants that I'm probably not going to include next year. Again, I don't hate anything, but I want to really focus on what I love. So I'll do a whole separate video on that, but let me know down below, what is something that you're going to do differently next year?